everyone. Welcome to Her Path, the podcast for busy women looking for purpose, health, and happiness. Today, we're talking about grief and work, working through grief, being productive while we're grieving. I asked us all to do this one today because I have experienced a loss recently. My mom passed away very unexpectedly. It was very unexpected, a little bit traumatic. And for the last couple of weeks, that's all that I've been dealing with. And I have just gotten so much help from so many people in my life, including these wonderful friends and women on this podcast with me. And I thought it was important to talk about how we move forward while still honoring and acknowledging the grief that we're in. So as I have been moving through things, and I'm certainly not through it by any means, but I, after a while, I needed to go back to work. I needed to start doing productive things again. Needed to find some kind of a new normal in the face of enormous change. And so I really did some thought work and some journaling and really took my time and thought about the things that would help me get back on track with my clients. My number one priority was getting back to work with my clients. They inspire me, they lift me up, they give me energy. And I had missed their presence while I was going through all of these things. So as I journaled around what to do to get myself back on track, because it seemed very overwhelming. Running a business, being a CEO, being a mom of teenagers, everything seemed so overwhelming. My husband was going through a job transition as well. He was coming into my company. There's just a lot of change and a lot of turmoil. So I wanted to share with you what I came up with and how I've been maneuvering, and would love the rest of your feedback and additional ideas. But here's what I've come up with. So the first thing was to take it slow, that I didn't have to go from 0 to 100 in, one day, that I had the choice to pick and choose the things that I started back with. For me, that was my clients, right? I didn't write a blog for a couple of weeks. We didn't have this podcast for a couple of weeks because of really what I was dealing with. But I had to make a choice of what was doable and most important and motivating. So finding that motivation, whatever that small thing was. And that was so helpful. And my motivation was my clients. So if it was interacting with my clients, I'm doing it. If it's all the other stuff, the emails, the newsletters, the blogs, all those other things, not so much. If something comes to me, I'll do it, but I'm giving myself some grace to come into things slowly. I've had to ask for help. I've had to ask for a lot of help, and busy, successful career women, that's sometimes hard for us. I know it's really hard for me to ask for help, but whether it's my brain not fully functioning right now and the brain fog that I'm in, or the fatigue that I feel, or the need to be with, my father during this time and sharing other responsibilities, asking for help has been critical. And it has reduced my stress, reduced my feeling of overwhelm, or I can't possibly do this. So however you can ask for help, that one is huge for me. It was a hard one, but so beneficial, because it lets me then, people want to help in times of grief. Everybody wants to do something and they don't know what to do besides make a casserole or send a bouquet of flowers. But when they say, what can I do for you? If you actually can answer that, it helps them and it helps us. So that has been a big life lesson for me. In addition to taking it slow, taking it small. So small chunks. So my first week back to work, I think I maybe worked 10 hours. That was my first week back. And I know I have the luxury of this because I own my own business, so I can create my own schedule, but maybe for other people that shows up differently, right? Maybe it's, if you have to work full time, then other things go by the wayside so that you can take those small steps and not have to jump into something overwhelmingly. Resting and takes breaks have been huge for me. I get exhausted easily. I get overwhelmed easily. So, seeing 2 clients and then taking a break, and then seeing 2 more clients and then taking a break. However, you can factor that into your work world and even your home world. I think that is so crucial, because before this happened in my life, I never fully understood how exhausting grief can be, and how, my term is, I feel like I've been walking through mud, and I wouldn't have understood that before I went through it. So to give myself the ability to just rest, to stop, to take those breaks, but still have a sense of productivity. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm figuring out what a whole new routine is going to look like in my world. This loss has changed everything. So, how am I supporting my dad? How am I, collaborating and supporting my sister? What do my kids need? They were very close to their grandmother, their yaya. So finding a routine has been, and we haven't done it yet, but we're in the throes of it. But every little piece that we can do, I think, is helpful to people's psyche. Establishing, Dad, we're going to have dinner with you twice a week, and one of them is going to be at our house. Or kids, we're going to go back to having our healthy meals. We're not eating every night. It was casseroles or takeout or, big pasta dishes. So grateful for everything that everyone's done for us. But at some point you have to get back to that normal sense. And then the same thing at work. What does the new normal look for work? Making sure I can call my dad in the morning, carving out time in my schedule for that, or to go and help him with something. All of those things, once we can get into that more normal state, will be additionally helpful. And then my last thing is the one that I struggle with the most, as we all often do, is giving ourselves grace, being kind to myself, giving myself grace when I just can't really stay in the moment, or the tears come when I don't want them to come, which they do. And okay, you worked 10 hours this week. Have grace on that when you usually work 50 or 60 hours. Giving myself the grace to move through this at whatever pace it's going to be, is also part of like letting go of control. And you guys all know that I'm a total control freak, a project manager in me. I can't project manage this, but I can give myself grace and just say, it's okay. Yeah, I didn't go for a walk today. It's okay. Or I'm going to get in the pool, and instead of doing 30 minutes, I'm going to do 15 minutes. That's okay. So that's where my head is right now. That's where my journey has taken me. And I would really love to open it up and hear about your experiences, or what's worked for you in the past, or what you've helped your clients on, or your patients. Would really love to hear your thoughts on all things around grieving and working, and how to work through it all.
Let's see. My last bout with grief was 2017. We had 4 family members pass away within 3 months. And it was just like, I think I went through it, but I don't really remember it. It was such a blur. But I do know that I allowed myself to cry. I didn't hold it back. In fact, I stood up to speak at my mom's service, and I stood up and I just lost it for like 5 minutes. And it was what I was most afraid of, but people were very, very kind. Yeah, it was a tough time, but we got through it. And my biggest thing was, it was really the first time our family had experienced grief. So I thought, my kids are watching me. So I really want to go through this. I want to be vulnerable. I want to share with them. I want them to know that it is part of life. And yeah, it was rough. But I love what you said, Lisa, all those little chunky things. I think I went back to work. I don't remember, like, taking time out for myself. So much is just kind of going on from one death to the next, which was kind of odd at the time.
Wow. And
The last time I had experienced my stepfather who raised me passed away, I was in residency. I was no, actually I was in medical school because it was right. I was actually pregnant with the twins, and it was early on in the pregnancy, and we hadn't told my dad about it. And we were super excited, about, telling people. And my dad had been he was not healthy. I mean, he had all the things. He was on kidney dialysis. He lost, he really didn't take good care of him. He had diabetes, insulin, dependent diabetes, all the things. So he was in and out of the hospital. But regardless, you never expect it.
Right.
You're never prepared whenever you're hit with it. And he was in California and I was in Texas. And so we were already not seeing him very often. And I think I just barreled through it. I just barreled through it because I in my mind, I could not stop. So I didn't really take any time off for myself. And I've, just kept going and had the same routine. Nothing really changed for me. And I don't know if I think that was just my coping mechanism. That was just my way to get through. And because we had a long distance relationship, because I lived in Texas and he was in California and I wasn't seeing him regularly, it was almost like it didn't happen. It was almost like I knew he was out there and I was, like he was not gone. And even to this day, I think I still feel that way somehow. Like he's not gone. He's out there somewhere. Although there are many moments, even now, it's been, 16 years later, I still get tearful, I still, miss him. And I have moments where, we'll cry when we talk about, memories and, reminiscing. But yeah, I pretty much barrel through and I didn't really take any time for myself.
And if you could do it again, how would you do it differently? How would
I don't think I would. I don't think I would. I don't think I function well that way. I think I'm someone who I need to keep myself busy. I feel like I need to, and I really don't think I did a disservice to myself or to my father's memory or to my family. And maybe my brothers experienced it differently than I did, but I think being the oldest and having gone through so many other traumatic things in my life where I have had to just barrel through things, I think that was my way of coping, is just keep going, keep the routine, keep the goal in sight, and it was okay. It was okay for me.
Yeah, and I think, we all experience grief differently. And there is no right or wrong way to grieve. And I think that's where that self-compassion comes in. And just, I love, Elise, how you're you're taking it slow and you're taking it small, and that's working for you. And Gabby, and you didn't need to do that. I feel like I have two separate lives, like my life before life coaching and my life after life coaching. I lost my dad before life coaching, and I would just say it was a hot mess. Just a hot mess. And I wouldn't change it for the world. But I didn't, in me judging myself, like, I don't think I grieved very well. I didn't do it right. Even though I just said that there's no right way to grieve, right? But after life coaching, I was actually able to process my dad's death and do some grieving, and do some healing. And since then, I know a person is very different than losing an animal, but just in October, I had to let go of my 16-year-old black lab who I've had since 12 weeks old. And I use that as an opportunity to be curious about what the feeling of grief felt like in my body and letting it be there rather than trying to push it down or run away or avoid or numb out. Because I did all of those things with my dad's death. And it was a very interesting experience. And I would have to say, during that process, like very heavily leaned on my spiritual side of myself. I always talk about there's 4 dimensions of ourselves. There's our mental side, our physical side, our emotional side, and our spiritual side. And I think a lot of times, just in life in general, we talk a lot about physical and mental, but not so much the emotional or the spiritual sides of ourselves. So just leaning on what my concept is of God and afterlife and those sorts of things really brought a lot of comfort to me. And also, in grieving my dad's loss as well. So I think I love that, like you said, Elise, just taking it slow and easy and knowing that there's no right or wrong way to do it, that it's so unique as we're all snowflakes. Our grief experience is snowflakes too.
I love that. That's so sweet. I wanted to ask another question because, I like to read. So I've been, I read this book on grieving. I'm just trying to work through it all in my way. And one of the things that has struck me is through this, how many people have said to me, I don't know what to say and I don't know what to do. And I feel really helpless. And I really want to help you. And I really want to show you love. I just don't know how to do it. And then I was reading this book. It's Okay Not to Be Okay is the name of the book. Or it's okay when you're not okay, or something like that. And it was an interesting conversation about how our society doesn't like to deal with grief. And our society tries to push it down and just power through it. And so we as a society don't know how to interact with grief, whether it's somebody else who's grieving or it's ourselves who's grieving. And that just really struck me. And I was curious what your all experiences or what you think about that, or what you've seen in either your professional lives or your home lives.
I can just start, as you all may or may not know, in my other professional life, I am a hospice nurse. And absolutely, people don't know how to handle grief and they don't know what to do. And it's so uncomfortable. And in my professional life, I've learned to embrace the uncomfortable in that process. But then when it comes to my personal life, which is interesting, like I personally don't know how to handle somebody's grieving, and what I should do to comfort them, what I should say. Should I send a letter? It's very, very interesting, like 2 different worlds. Even like professionally, I can show up and be okay with not being okay and letting other people, just want to avoid or show up or just kind of like push it down and avoid it. And then having the same experience in my personal life. It's very odd and interesting, I guess.
Are there any things that you've learned from your professional life that you can share, like any if we as a society just taking the stance that the books did, just for conversation, if we as a society do not really know how to deal with grief, but you work and your profession is really in this whole space, are there things that you've learned over the years that are more comforting and more appropriate or less helpful?
Yeah.
I think for me, oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, go for it.
I think for me, and I had a lot more of this during the pandemic. I took care of a lot of couples. I take care of a lot of families, and a lot of couples would come in together for their checkups, for their follow-ups, for their medical conditions. And then during the pandemic, so many spouses passed away. And so when I would get someone to come for follow-up, they would update me on, their spouse passing away from COVID. There was a huge number during the pandemic. And of course, that still happens now with, just the nature of life. But I found for me, just holding that space, just saying, oh, I'm so sorry. And just letting that quietness sit there and allowing that person to just feel and to express whatever comes naturally to them, because not everybody wants to be, consoled. Not everybody wants to be, pampered, or not everyone likes all of the attention. Now, some people do want to be hugged and, consoled more deeply and are more, emotional and inviting. I'm not that way. So I'm okay with having a little bit of, distance, but not everyone's like that. So kind of just seeing where the other person is and sitting, holding space, saying, I'm so sorry, and not expect anything, not feel obligated, or not feel like it is my job to take the grief away, because it's not. We don't take the grief away. We don't necessarily, make anything better in the long run. Just to be someone to hear, to listen, to hold the space, and then also offer anything that person that we care about maybe needs in the moment that they express, to be willing to offer that if we feel comfortable with. But I feel like the holding space it's what's really, really helpful for a lot of people, in letting them guide you in how much or how or little they want from you. I don't know if that made sense the way I said it, but
Yes.
It does. I remember working in the hospital one time, and it was an older woman passed away, and the people were different ethnicity than I was, but the room was filled with so many people, and they were literally not holding back at all. They were like grieving so loudly and wailing and crying and throwing themselves on the deceased person. But you know what? That was not a norm for me to experience that. But I really think that was a healthy way for them. I mean, they didn't hold anything back. They got it all out. It was like this big discharge of emotion. And I think that probably could have been, a way to grieve, fully grieve. They didn't hang on to anything. It all came out in floods.
mm-hmm.
I thought it was a fascinating way to grieve.
Right. And in situations like that, also not being judgmental for the way someone grieves.
Yeah.
Whether someone is very, expressive and very in tune with their emotions in a way that, is, you can perceive it externally, versus someone who grieves quietly and internally. And like you said earlier, but there's no right or wrong way of doing it. And being non-judgmental in the way someone grieves, I think, is super, super important.
Right. Because everyone's got their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I have learned that is not helpful is to give people just kind of these empty words of reassurance. Like, oh, time heals all wounds, or, those sorts of things. Like you said, Gabby, and what you did, Nancy, is just being there and holding space, non-judgmental space, and allowing that person to be however they need to be in that moment, and not feeling like you have to say or do anything to make them feel better, because there is nothing that you can say or do to make them feel better. And that's not the purpose of grieving. We're not meant to feel better in grief.
Right.
I think that's such an important statement and important reminder. You know, I have multiple cultures in my extended family. And there's one culture who everybody who has reached out to me, the very first thing that they've said to me after, you know, how are you? Which I don't know how to answer right now. People ask, oh, how are you doing? Like, I don't know. I don't have the words for that. But then they'll say, be strong. You have to be strong for your family, for your father, for your kids. Be strong. And I know it's a cultural thing, and I know it means no harm or disrespect, and I know it comes from a place of love. But to your point, Beth, it's not helpful, because for me, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be strong for everybody, but I also have to let myself be, whether it's vulnerable or stay in bed for a little longer or just cry for a day. I need to do that. And that's, you know, but when you hear over and over again, be strong, you're the matriarch of the family now. Be strong, be strong. It's hard and it's not helpful.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very different conversation than we usually have. Thank you, ladies, for indulging me. I hope that you as our audience found this helpful or something to think about. Please like and subscribe and share this podcast. If it resonated with you, we would love to get more followers. We would love to get more subscriptions. And thank you so much for listening.
Hey, one more thing before we leave. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We are certified professional coaches, but this broadcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice. Okay, thanks for listening. See you next week.